Recently, I made a video that delved quite deep into the fact that Duolingo doesn't work. What it didn't do was to talk about the reasons that Duolingo doesn't work. That's because that's just a whole big can of worms that I will get to one day. That will be a lot to unpack in one video. But what that video did was to assume that people who were familiar with my content and this style of language learning were already watching it. So it kind of assumed that a lot of us were on the same page when it comes to the basics of language learning. But what I thought might be helpful for some people, whether it is Duolingo that you are frustrated by or any other method that you've tried to learn a language that hasn't worked, is to hear the things that in my experience have been the most helpful when it comes to actually learning a foreign language to fluency. If you don't know who I am, I'm kind of a big deal. Ciao chicos, my name's Lamont, I'm Australian, and like most Australians, I grew up monolingual. I also went through my 20s monolingual. I've been spending most of my 30s working out better ways for adults to learn foreign languages. So I started learning the first foreign language that I would say I was actually successful with, Swedish, as a 29-year-old. Now my circumstances when I started and now are far from ideal, and I don't say that to win sympathy. I just say that because I think if I can learn a foreign language, you can too. There are links in the description to some courses that I only talk about when they're on some kind of deal, and at the moment those courses are on the best deal that they ever go on, which is their Black Friday special, which is 67% off courses in 11 languages. There are links in the description. It only lasts until Monday, Tuesday morning-ish, depending where you are. Links in the description. Sometimes my videos are somewhat more extreme or silly experiments, like trying to learn 1,000 words in a day and that kind of stuff, and that is for the purpose of making entertaining videos. This video is just what I perceive to be the 4 things that I did right in order to actually learn a foreign language where I'd failed previously. Alright, so Swedish, which is the first foreign language that I actually came to a level of fluency in, so my first second language you could say, was not anywhere near my first attempt to learn a language, not even as an adult. Like a lot of kids, although not that many kids in Australia, I did a language at school. That language was German. I actually probably could have gotten pretty good because we had quite a good German teacher and we did it for about 4 years. Some of the students in our class were quite good. I was not that, not because I was bad at foreign languages, but because I never ever did my work and I hardly ever went to class. If you can see yourself in that story, whether it's with maths or economics or a foreign language, all hope is not lost. As an adult, you can learn whatever you want to if you just put in the time. And I think it was in first or second year uni, I was one of those hipster wannabe music students who thought it would be cool to speak French. Honestly, I probably just bought this kit of Teach Yourself French because it was on special and for no other reason. I don't think I ever even opened the box. And I don't know how common this is, particularly amongst Australians, but I always felt like that was an itch unscratched. Like, I haven't learned a foreign language yet. I need to learn a foreign language. And so when I was about 25 or 26, I decided that German would be my best shot of doing that because it was, after all, the second language that I knew the most of still from school. And I started listening to some Learn German podcasts and stuff like that. But I also formed a little club, which was unusually proactive of me back then. It had 2 reasonably fluent speakers of German from Australia and 1 Austrian guy. And it actually worked, but when I say worked, I don't mean that I learned German. I mean that at least at the club meetings, I think there were about 3 or 4, we did actually speak German. Now I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but there was actually a reason for me telling you all that, and that was that the first thing that I think I did right with Swedish that I did wrong with everything else was that I picked a language that I was attracted to. Now I say attracted to rather than liked because I didn't speak a word of Swedish at the time, so how would I know I liked it? I didn't like it, right? In the same way that unless you believe in love at first sight, you generally think you're probably going to have to talk to someone before you know if you like them or not. I was attracted to it. It had a certain-ness about it that appealed to me for whatever reason. And maybe that's unusual, but that's just how I get into a lot of things. People always try and attribute my reasons to something that makes sense to them, like, oh, it's for the hot girls or for the dark crime series, or you must like flat pack furniture or what. It's like, no, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with hot girls or dark crime series or flat pack furniture, but that wasn't why I got into Swedish. It appealed to me so much that I was actually able to do some pretty uncomfortable things in my pursuit of learning it. The difference is that with German, and especially with French, It wasn't actually the notion of speaking German or speaking French that appealed to me. That wasn't what I was after. What I was after was the notion of speaking a foreign language. All the other languages that I'd either spent time on or thought about spending time on, like French, felt like they were kind of necessary levers to pull on if I ever wanted to scratch that itch of learning a foreign language. Like, oh, I guess German makes sense. With Swedish, it was the other way around. This sounds weird, but with Swedish, I actually never really had an intention of becoming fluent because I didn't think it would be possible to be fluent. So knowing the few things that I then knew about Swedish, I felt that the odds were completely stacked against me. 1, there are going to be very few people to speak with. 2, there are going to be very few resources. And 3, they speak really good English, so if I ever do go there, they'll all just speak English with me anyway. But the fact that I was just on fire for Swedish actually flips all of those things on their head. They just become complete non-issues. So that is absolutely the first thing that I would recommend. If for whatever reason you wake up one day and just have a certain language in mind, you're just like, Thai or Polish, just start. So the second thing I'd say I did right was to treat literally anything that was in Swedish at all, everything from instruction manuals to weird series about Sweden in the 1860s or something, as material that was there to teach me the language. Now, I'm not saying that this is always efficient or a very good idea at all. It led to some extremely inefficient uses of my time where I learned literally nothing, but the attitude that was born out of that misconception is one that I think language learners everywhere stand to hear again. Everything that is in that language has the capacity to teach you something about that language. If you're learning one of the more, and I don't like to use this term, but like mainstream languages for English speakers, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, that kind of thing, it can be extremely useful to have that kind of stuff. But whether you are learning Spanish or Mongolian, you still want to adopt the attitude that everything that is in that language is there for you to learn the language from. And that's the one that I took into Swedish, and it worked way better than anything I'd done before. Now, there are more efficient ways to spend your time and less efficient ways, but it's still beneficial to spend time with the language, and that's what I did with Swedish because I thought I didn't have any choice. So in summary, the second thing that I did right was that I now treat everything that is in the language in any way, shape, or form as being there to help me to learn it. The third thing I got right, and again this was by luck or by sheer enthusiasm, was to adopt a no amount is too much attitude. And this is the main reason that I find maintaining a healthy lifestyle much harder than learning a language. Much harder, because health is a game of balance, right? Too much exercise is not going to be good for you, it's going to get you injured. And too much of any food, no matter what it is not going to be healthy. So I find it more difficult to be a physically healthy person than I do to be a language learner, because with physical health, you can't just take a lever and crank it all the way to the top. That doesn't work. But with language learning, if you've got time, you can. Now, bear in mind that I was 29 and already had one kid when I started learning Swedish, so it's not as if I sat down and just listened to Swedish for like 10 hours a day. I definitely didn't do that. But any time that I had a chance to get some Swedish into my eyes and ears, I did. One of the things I did right, again totally by accident, was to leave 80 minutes of an audiobook, which was the amount on a CD, just playing on repeat in my car every day on the way to work and back for about a year, meaning that I heard that audiobook or those chapters of the audiobook like maybe 60 or 70 times. Now, there are people who are going to say, well, that doesn't help because there are things you just can't pick up no matter how many times you hear it without actually learning those things. And that's true, but the thing is, you get to know the audio before you get to know the language, which means that when you do come across a word in your study of whatever kind it is, you go, oh yeah, that's from like the 41st minute of that book. Now, I was prepared to do that while I was driving, but I wasn't prepared to do that sitting down and watching like a TV series or something that I didn't understand. So it was quite slow. It was maybe 2 to 3 years before I literally started understanding all of that audiobook. But in the end, I understood all of the audiobook. And that's what most people just never do. They never put in the hours listening and then learning the words that they're listening to just understand everything. You have to understand a lot of one thing before you can understand a lot of everything. And that brings me to the fourth thing that I think I am doing right more than did right. and I know it sounds cheesy, so just give me a second, okay, because it's not what you think, and that is to never be finished. And when I say never finished, I don't mean never give up. You hear never give up a lot, and that's great, but that's not what I mean. I mean that I am not done, and I never treat it like I'm done. You look at it from the point of view of today, my Swedish is absolutely not as good as it could be, and there's no point that it can get to that it is as good as it could be. But today, it's definitely not as good as it could be. Now, you look at that from past Lamont's perspective, 3-4 years ago, he looks at me today and goes, well, you're done. Okay, to give you an example of what I mean, I still actually haven't had the chance to go to Sweden. I'm really hoping to go next year. But I don't think that I'm gonna get there and be like, yes, I can Swedish now. Obviously, I speak enough Swedish that I'll be able to go to Sweden and be fine without the need to use English, but I also hope to learn an unbelievable amount. I don't want to be good enough at Swedish. I don't want to be fluent in Swedish. I want my Swedish to be on an improving road. So if you were disappointed to hear my argument that Duolingo doesn't work, you shouldn't be disappointed because these things work much more effectively. So 1, pick a language that you're on fire for. 2, treat everything that is in that language as there to teach you the language. 3, no amount is too much. Get it into your eyes and ears all you possibly can. And 4, don't stop, just keep getting better. So I hope you got something out of the video. If you are a beginner and you do want something specifically for beginners, the links in the description give you 67% off, and it's the only time of year that you can get them at that price, so check it out if you're interested. Otherwise, I just hope you enjoyed it, and lo quiero.